What's up, guys? Today I have another video for you, and today is actually going to be a paper video. I know that's probably kind of a strange type of video to film, but it's kind of fountain pen related. Not really necessarily to do complete with fountain pens, but here you go. This is a cut pad. Well, put it on its side. This is a cut pad, A5 size of a river. Of a paper called Tomoe River, and it's made by the Tomoe company in Japan. And this is kind of, I don't know whether it's really been like a new paper, but it's kind of a well-known paper because of the fact that it's very difficult to get, especially in America. Tomoe they do they'll ship it to the U.S., but there's obviously a minimum order requirement. I believe the minimum order requirement is 2 reams, and a ream of paper costs, I believe, $100 US. Plus, you're gonna have to pay for shipping, taxes, customs fees, whatever. So I believe for people who do order this paper, it turns out to be around like $300 total for 2 reams of paper. What's nice and what's different about this paper is that, first of all, it's very fountain pen friendly. You don't really get a lot of feathering, you don't really get a lot of bleed through, but the amazing thing is that this paper is actually super thin and super lightweight. I believe this particular type of Tomoe River is either 33 or 35 grams per square meter. And if you want to compare it to other more well-known fountain pen friendly papers like Clairefontaine, which is 90 grams, and Rhodia, which I believe is 80 grams, most people associate thicker and heavier papers with being more fountain pen friendly. Those papers, maybe not necessarily, vellum papers, they're pretty good about feathering, but the thickness will usually prevent bleed through. Now, ignore these spots on the paper. What's amazing about this paper is that, I wrote a test sheet with it, and the paper is so thin. Like, if you listen to it, it's crinkly. It's like newspaper, and you can actually see I have a piece of graph Rhodia underneath. It's super thin, and when I first decided, okay, I'm going to stick a piece of paper underneath, in case there's any bleed through, I don't want to waste the paper. I just lifted up what I thought was a sheet of paper, and slid a paper underneath, and then I realized after writing it, after ripping off that top page, that I had actually accidentally grabbed 2 sheets of the paper. And, this was the top sheet. I wrote with various different pens, different inks, just to kind of test out the waters, I suppose you could say. But you can see, I really like this paper for fountain pen inks, especially for using the flex nib. I think it works out really nicely. The top was written with my Lamy 2000 with Tsukio from Pilot in the Iroshizuku line. And you can see there, this paper is really nice for shading. Even, this is an extra fine nib, and I'm not sure if you can really make out on the video. Granted, the ink itself shades really well to begin with, so it's kind of an unfair advantage, but even normally on paper like Rhodia or Clairefontaine, you don't actually get as good of shading, it's a little difficult to see, as you do, even with that ink. And over here I have Noodler's Beaver, which is like a reddish brown. I definitely, it's a shame, I definitely know you can't really make it out, but the shading on this it's different. I'm not really sure how to explain it. I'm not really sure what to compare it to. I might as well go through, and you can especially see the difference in shading in the Tsukio here. Let's say if you look at the J to the U, and the P. This one is a Pelican Brilliant Black from Lamy Safari in fine, and the bottom one is a medium nib using Noodler's Lexington Gray. Now, the reason why I think this paper doesn't really feather is because of how non-absorbent the paper is. Generally with feathering, what's happening is, if you have excess ink on the surface of the paper, or, wet ink that gets absorbed into the paper, the fibers in the paper starts spreading the ink out via like a capillary action. Whereas with this paper, when you move your finger across it, you can really, like, because it's thin, the nib is actually imprinting into the paper quite a bit. But you can also kind of feel like the bumps where the ink, it just dries differently on there. It sits on the surface and it takes a while to dry. If you can make out here, like the word "quick," that I, you see that smear there. That was actually maybe an hour later, where I just, I looked at the ink, I saw it seemed a little wet, so I just kind of smeared my dry finger across it, and it actually smeared. And that's just a dot. That's not even actual text. I can definitely say that even after 6 hours, some of these thicker lines, like here where the bottom of the Q is, where the nib really put out a lot of ink on the surface of the paper, it still wasn't dry. So I think that's what prevents it really from feathering. And in terms of show through, it's actually, you're gonna get show through. It's such a thin paper. Obviously, you can see the grid line here. You're gonna see what's written on the other side no matter what. But in terms of bleed through, there's almost, very little bleed through. You can kind of see there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points, 5 specks where, ink actually bled through. And those were some of the thicker portions of my writing with the flex nib. I got absolutely no bleed through with the extra fine here, the fine or the medium nib. A little close here, but still no bleed through at least. And in terms of feathering, it doesn't feather because I think the ink just kind of sits on the surface of the paper and just the water content in the ink dries away instead of getting absorbed into the paper. And one thing to note is, why I tried to use Lexington Gray in a medium nib is that with Lexington Gray, even on 80-gram Rhodia paper, it actually feathers for me. Writing with a flex nib definitely feathers. Honestly, I got Lexington Gray to use in the flex nib because I figured the shading with the different grays to blacks would look really nice, but it feathers horribly, and the letters just look terrible. So unfortunately, I can't use it with that. And if you actually write with Lexington Gray, even in a fine or a medium nib, you will still get a little bit of feathering. It's not as noticeable as it is with a flex nib, but if you look close enough, you can see the feathering, and it makes, I don't know, it's not the best ink in the world for those particular papers. I haven't tried using Lexington Gray on Clairefontaine yet. I do have Clairefontaine paper, I just haven't gotten around to it yet, because my main notepads of choice is Rhodia pads. Rhodia paper, they're relatively inexpensive compared to some of the others, and they perform very well. In terms of the color of the paper, this is actually their white color. You'll actually notice it's not like a super bright white. Rhodia is known for having super bright white paper, so you can kind of see the difference. It's actually, the color of the paper is actually kind of messing with the light aliasing with my camera. Oh well, crappy quality camera. The paper also comes in, so this is the white. It's more of like a very light ivory. And then it also comes in cream. And you see here, cream is much darker. Compared to 3, there's actually a protective sheet on top. So you have their white, you have Rhodia's white, and then you have their cream. This cream color is more colored like the Rhodia premium R pads, which they consider an ivory pad. It's a little lighter than the ivory pads, but just maybe a shade or two underneath that. What else is there about this paper? Yeah, that's about it. Writes really well. It's thin, so you can get show through, but in terms of the finger feel, it's not the smoothest. I believe they make 4 types of Tomoe River paper. One is a glossy finish. One is a matte finish, which I believe this is the matte finish. Then they have an eco-friendly version, and then they have a thick but lightweight version. And I believe the thicker but lightweight version will go up to like, I don't know, it goes up to much higher GSM. Probably not as high as Clairefontaine. I don't really have the specs on that. And I really like it. For a paper that's hard to get, you know. Obviously, I didn't order reams myself. I had actually gotten it off of classified ads from Fountain Pen Network. I believe the user's name is Penheld, and he sells either uncut sheets or these pressed glue top pads. For me, I don't really like the sheets. They're a little larger than like A4 size. I think they're like close to 9x12. They're just under 9x12 long sheets, and it's a little unwieldy for me to use. I prefer pads, and it's not like I'm writing notes or anything. Like, I'm not what's the term? I'm not printing anything on there. You know, this paper was kind of made as another option for people to print catalogs and other publications that have to get shipped out, because you get high quality paper that you can print with no issues, but meanwhile you will save on shipping costs because of how lightweight the paper is. I believe this, compared to, let's say, regular like 24-pound copy paper, it's like half the weight per ream. So there's that, and that's why it was made. It's not super popular. I think, other than from Fountain Pen Network, there is another person, a Japanese gentleman in Japan, who sells hand-bound notebooks made out of, and journals made out of Tomoe River paper. Those are expensive books. You get a good amount of sheets in it, but I believe the price starts at like $120 plus shipping and handling to the US. So there's that. You know, if you guys, I think it's definitely worth trying out. I believe I paid $7 per pad of 50 sheets, which isn't a terrible price. I know for paper it may seem like a lot, but for me, this isn't going to be like a scrap paper for me. This is just more going to be for me practicing my flex nib, practicing with my flex nibs with specific inks that don't play well with other papers, and maybe for like as stationery for letter writing, like personal letters. I think it would be nice. It is really thin, so storing it is kind of an issue. It does kind of like bend really easily and crinkles, and you really have to be careful when you're storing this. So yeah, if you guys are interested, go on Fountain Pen Network. I'm sure if you look online, you could find a link to the person that's selling this paper in the US. Or, I mean, if you're really interested, you can always just import two or more reams yourself, I suppose. It's just going to be reams of paper. It's not even going to be in pads, so you're going to have to make your own pads if you choose to go that route. Yeah, good paper. Highly recommend it. It's price comparable to Rhodia and Clairefontaine, if you can find a supplier for it. That's the only bad thing about it. It's difficult to get in the US. I still have to ink up one of the flex pens with Lexington Gray to see, but I mean, in terms of like shading on this is really nice. Oh, one more thing to note is that because the paper doesn't really absorb ink, I got a lot more railroading with this paper than I do with, let's say, Rhodia. Actually, since I have everything here, and I actually have a pen here, so you see, I'll go like, you see, I'm already like railroading right away. I mean, it's not like you can't write on it. If I use no pressure, I can write on it. Once I do any kind of flex, there we go. It railroads pretty easily. Actually, if you look in my writing, granted I was writing this relatively quickly, but you can kind of see there's railroading on the B here. Where else? I know, oh, right here. There's railroading on the C. Actually, if you look, you can just see how wet the surface of the paper is. And oh shoot, I actually already smeared, already smeared it. If you're gonna write on this paper with a lot of ink, or like honestly anything beyond a fine nib or super wet ink, I would suggest you let this sit to the side for half a day to let it dry completely, or you're gonna smear the ink. But it's nice. I don't know. It's not for general note taking. Honestly, I wouldn't even use it for journaling unless you're going to use a blotting paper with it. I'd be interested to see how the shading looks with blotting paper, because with blotting paper you're going to take out a lot of excess ink. Whereas if you look at, come on, focus camera. Whatever. It's not going to focus for me. If you actually look, that P actually railroaded too, so you see it's a little off as I filled it in. It shades nicely, but there are portions, especially towards the heavier downstrokes, where it deposits a lot of ink. That's the darkest color of ink you're gonna get. You're not gonna get any any color that's darker than that color. So I think if you blot some of the excess ink off the surface of the paper, it'll look a lot better. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's enough interest in it, if you guys are interested in getting this paper, maybe I'll just try and put a direct link to the user on Fountain Pen Network that you can just order this off of, I guess. There isn't that much out there on this paper because it is hard to find, but definitely worth it. I'm probably going to order more. Like, I really like it. It writes well. It is very, very fountain pen friendly, more so than Rhodia, surprisingly, considering how thin it is. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.